This episode of The Young Turks is brought to you by Netflix. Go to netflix.com/TYT for an awesome free trial membership.
Historic collapse on the part of the Democrats at the end of the so-called budget negotiations, where the Republicans got almost everything they wanted. In fact, they got more than they could have ever imagined. John Boehner literally said that at one point before the negotiations were even over. Originally, of course, Barack Obama came out, just to review real quick, and gave his $40 billion concession from his 2011 budget proposal. He got no credit for it, didn't ask for any credit for it. You know, that goes towards what a bad politician he is. Because you can't argue that, because you can argue that, hey, listen, he's trying to seem centrist, and that's why he's agreeing with the Republicans, and that's why he's seeming to cave in on negotiations. But even if you believe that, and that is your ultimate goal, well, why didn't you ask for any public credit for $40 billion in cuts? That's because you're a bad politician. And you don't know how to make your own case. So that was out the window before anybody even had a discussion. We started at square one. And then you guys know the whole drill. $4 billion, $6 billion, $20 billion, $3 billion. And then we got to the point where the president had given away $33 extra billion, when in the beginning the Republicans had only asked for 32. Okay, so it was already an epic collapse. It was already a disaster of historic proportions. Now, later, the Republicans had moved their request to 61 because of Tea Party pressure. They're playing good cop, bad cop on Obama. They're like, this guy's a sucker. It's the easiest mark in the world. Oh, no. Oh, look, the Tea Party is twisting my arm. I am going to need more concessions. And when the president came out and seemed to draw the line in the beginning of last week and said, all right, $33 billion. I told you on this program that there ain't no way in the world he's going to stick to $33 billion, that he's going to give them a lot more in cuts. Now, people say I say that because I don't like the president. That's absurd. Then why did we spend all that time trying to elect him? No, of course not. I hope that the president is awesome. I wish he were. I wish he were a great leader. I wish that every single day. I wake up with that hope every day. But every day that hope is disappointed. Okay, so I told you that based on experience, because it's my job to follow this. And of course, again, I was right. So the president gave them concessions of $38.5 billion. He gave them $6.5 billion more in cuts than they originally asked for. Now, how bad a negotiator can you be? If you told me somebody was that bad a negotiator, I wouldn't believe it. I think they must have some other motive. Okay, I mean, that is unbelievable. And by the way, if that weren't enough, they're so proud that they're like, oh yeah, well, we didn't give in on any of the riders on Planned Parenthood or the EPA, except they kind of did in Washington, D.C. They threw Washington under the bus, saying, okay, the Republicans get their way against family planning in Washington. It's just a minor concession. Who cares about the people in D.C.? Okay. So, in the end, what the president and the Democrats should come out and be a little embarrassed, right? And say, oh, God, forget embarrassed, right? Say, oh, these cuts were tough, man. I can't believe we did these cuts. You know, that's got to be it, right? Of course not. In the end, the president and the Democrats came out and said what a wonderfully historic moment this was and what great accomplishments they have brought to the American people. I laugh at you, man. All right, here comes President Obama to celebrate his enormous defeat. Clip number one.
Tomorrow, I'm pleased to announce that the Washington Monument, as well as the entire federal government, will be open for business. And that's because today, Americans of different beliefs came together again. In the final hours before our government would have been forced to shut down, leaders in both parties reached an agreement that will allow our small businesses to get the loans they need, our families to get the mortgages they applied for, and hundreds of thousands of Americans to show up at work and take home their paychecks on time, including our brave men and women in uniform. This agreement between Democrats and Republicans, on behalf of all Americans, is on a budget that invests in our future while making the largest annual spending cut in our history. Like any worthwhile compromise, both sides had to make tough decisions and give ground on issues that were important to them. And I certainly did that. Some of the cuts we agreed to will be painful. Programs people rely on will be cut back. Needed infrastructure projects will be delayed. And I would not have made these cuts in better circumstances. But beginning to live within our means is the only way to protect those investments that will help America compete for new jobs. A few months ago, I was able to sign a tax cut for American families because both parties worked through their differences and found common ground. Now the same cooperation will make possible the biggest annual spending cut in history. And it's my sincere hope that we can continue to come together as we face the many difficult challenges that lie ahead.
So, 2 different times he says, biggest spending cut in history. Aren't I awesome? Yeah, you would be if you were a Republican president. Then you could boast about the biggest spending cuts in history. As a Democrat, you're supposed to say, hey, you know what? If we're going to do spending cuts, and Democrats don't say, and I certainly don't say, that we should never do spending cuts, not even close. That if we're going to do them, then it should be shared sacrifice. We should also raise taxes. Instead, we cut taxes just a couple of months ago. And by the way, did we make up how much we cut in taxes in terms of this spending cut? Not even close. Not remotely close. We're talking about 10% of the tax cuts we gave away to the rich, we just cut from the middle class and the poor. Wow, what a historic accomplishment. This is a joke. All it is a redistribution of wealth, and they've got a Democratic president up there bragging about it. And he says, we have to live within our means, and, this is the time that we have to do that. And, it's reinforcing one Republican talking point after another, saying we have found common ground, basically owning this agreement, saying he's in favor of it. Of course, in fact, he's bragging about that compromise, and he said both sides have to give up something. Really? What did the Republicans give up? They originally asked for $32 billion. They got $38.5 billion. What did they give up? Nothing. Oh, well, they didn't get to kill Planned Parenthood. Wow, what a great victory. You know what the polling is on Planned Parenthood? 2-to-1 support across the country. He's bragging that he kind of won on an issue that was not even an issue. That if you had brought it to the American people, the Republicans would have gotten hammered on. That's why Reid brought it up at the end, as if that's what's holding up Planned Parenthood, and that'll be our big victory when we protect Planned Parenthood. Because he saw those 2-to-1 polls. In fact, I know because I read an article where Harry Reid's office said we saw the polls, we were encouraged by that. Then that's your big victory? Holding on to something that already existed and is supported by 2-to-1 of the people? They suck.
Get a load of Netflix. They deliver the movie to your house, no late charges, free shipping.
You can watch thousands of movies or TV shows straight on your PC or on your television through a gaming console.
Netflix.com/TYT. Free trial membership. You get Netflix all over you.